Good morning to you, St. Lucia. Thank you so much as always. It's an absolute pleasure having you join us here live from the studios of the National Television Network. And if it's that time, you know it's the morning update with Lucia and Homer. I am Lisa Joseph, alongside the beautiful Homer DeMarc on this Friday, January 20th. Homer, good morning.
Good morning to you, Lisa. Yes, it is Friday. We are heading into the weekend. And of course, we are encouraging all of you as we're in the midst of the fifth wave of the COVID-19 pandemic to ensure that you are staying within protocols, you're keeping protocols, you're sanitizing, you're wearing your face mask, you're keeping yourself, your family, and loved ones safe. It is the 21st of January 2022. Let me say good morning to those of you joining us on channel 122.
It is the 21st.
It is the 21st.
Look at that.
January, that one January that just flew by.
Yes. Oh, good Lord. Okay.
Those of you joining us on channel 122, Facebook, as well as our YouTube channels, you know, these are the platforms to always join in with Lisa and Homer. As you know, the Ministry of Health, Wellness and Elderly Affairs always keeping us informed as to the COVID-19 situation in St. Lucia. Yesterday, the ministry confirmed a total of 424 new cases of COVID-19. These samples were processed on Wednesday, that is the 19th of January 2022, from a total of 927 samples, of which 848 samples were from the Ezra Long Laboratory and 79 samples from Laboratory Services and Consultations Limited. These samples were collected during the period of the 16th to the 19th of January, and it brings the positive cases makes up 45.74% of all samples processed on that date, which is quite high when we look at sample rates. Confirmation was also received of a recovery of 153 individuals diagnosed with COVID-19, bringing the number of active cases in country to 3,921. If you are looking to get vaccinated today, let me just remind you, vaccination continues today at the VG Sports Complex, the Grosley Human Resource Center, the Zufre Hospital, the Jack Mel Wellness Center, InnoCare in VA4, and St. Anthony's Medical Center that is in Sunny Acres from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. And very quickly, the ministry is also informing you that of the temporary closure for a period of a week of the Saltbus Wellness Center, so that is from today to Friday, the 28th of January 2022. And during this time, individuals are encouraged to visit the Labrie Wellness Center, the VA4 Wellness Center, as well as the nearest wellness center to access primary health care services.
And Homer, it is the 21st, and it means we're edging closer to the celebration, the birthday celebration for St. Lucia's two Nobel laureates, Sir Derek Walcott, Sir Arthur Lewis. And today, there's a wreath-laying ceremony taking place at the South Lewis Community College. The grounds there at 10 a.m. And at 12 noon, there's the Derek Walcott Library Open House and the celebration of Sir Derek Walcott's legacy at the South Lewis Community College. Now, on Saturday, January 22nd, at the Heroes Park at Point Seraphim, there's a showcase and awards for oral and written skills in the Creole language, and that's being staged from 4 p.m. under the banner Tipa Wall Creole. I hope I did that right.
You did.
And then on Sunday, the birthday, the 23rd, as the nation celebrates, you will be able to enjoy the pandemic diaries. I'm not sure if you can enjoy those, but you know, in every dark cloud, there's a silver lining. And so those stories are meant to uplift, show our spirit of resilience and so forth. So that's airing from 6 p.m. right here at the National Television Network, local television stations, as well as the Facebook page and YouTube channel of the South Lewis Community College. So that should be great. Now, Homer, as we're celebrating our Nobel laureates, everything that they represent, the resilience of St. Lucians, the excellence, brilliance, and so forth, we're now preparing for a very important program that really encapsulates that spirit as well. And it's a cooperation project that is being hosted and staging with the government of Mexico and the government of St. Lucia. And it is a heritage management project, and it is to promote national identity, the creation of new tourism experiences, in the hope of reducing unemployment. And I would like to believe as well, it is helping us discover or rediscover who we are as a people. To help us discuss all of that, we have the president of the St. Lucia Archaeological and Historical Society. We do always align him, or we know him best, aligned with the South Louis Community College. He's Dr. Winston Fulgence, as well as the director for the St. Lucia National Trust, Mr. Bushni Tulsi. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Good morning to both of you.
Hi, good morning.
Thanks, but let me just correct that. I am not the director of the trust. That I have retired from the position.
Oh, so retired, okay.
Yes, and Janine Compton-Antoine has replaced me as the director. But I'm here because I work very closely with the Mexican embassy to develop the project.
And so our apologies, but we will always so fondly know you as the one who's championed for so long along with the St. Lucia National Trust.
I'm there with you, Lisa, yeah, so that's one.
Unfortunately, it's a role that you will not be able to escape.
I understand.
But we're happy to have you nonetheless, and that you're able to continue championing really the preservation of St. Lucia as a national heritage. So thank you so much for your service as well. But let's get to the cooperation project. And what would have spurred the need for this project?
Heritage management organizations like the Trust, the Archaeological and Historical Society, and a number of others have always lamented the lack of attention to our heritage assets, and in fact, beyond lack of attention, the rate at which we are losing key components of that heritage. And a number of things were happening in the background, as it were, with the coming together of heritage management organizations to look at how we could collaborate to promote heritage conservation and management. And the need for the long-term protection was obvious, but key elements of that, of the framework to achieve that, were missing. For example, there is no appropriate regulations or legislation and accompanying regulations to do that. There is the whole question of education and awareness and the technical skills to properly manage heritage assets. So these gaps exist. And there was some dialogue between the governments of Mexico and St. Lucia, and that's how the idea of this project was born.
And so for the Archaeological and Historical Society, Dr. Fulgence, I know that falls really squarely in your remit as well. For the society, as Mr. Tulsi just pointed out, that for so long we've had this gap existing. How do you see this project, and how are you welcoming this project in terms of being happy to meet your own mandate and in effect really sort of revive the society as well? Because I think for many St. Lucians, the organization is not foremost in mind.
No, it's not as prominent as it used to be. But the project is a very important one, and as a member of the Coalition of Heritage Management Organizations, it was an opportunity to see how we could not only build capacity, the gaps that Mr. Tulsi just spoke about, but also bring it up to the fore and to ensure that out of the heritage management process, there was something to get out of it. Because very often for people, yes, there's a heritage site, what does it mean? So what was coming out of it was that we were now able to find a way to get people to the point of employment because they developed the capacity to work on those sites. And the process also raises the awareness of people of the heritage, because now people are getting trained, we're talking about heritage, people are involved in the process, and it brings heritage to the fore, because very often heritage only becomes something important when it is threatened. And that's the worst time for it to come to the fore, because it would mean that it is threatened because people don't know. So it's necessary now to get us to a point where people understand, people embrace the heritage, so that we don't have to constantly worry about threatening, the threats, that are constantly coming to heritage.
You know, that is very interesting, and the program, I think, is one that is exciting, because when you delve into St. Lucia's rich culture and heritage, and you start hearing some of the stories as to what really happened, it gets you excited. But in terms of just understanding who we are as a people. I think our culture and our heritage plays a significant part. You don't know, you can't know who you are if you don't know where you come from, basically. So this program for me is lending to our national development on a really large scale. In terms of involvement of persons in the program, who is the program targeting?
The program is targeting everybody who is interested.
Okay.
Of course, there'll be a limit because there's a certain amount of capacity, but anyone who's interested in the training can apply, and because most of it is virtual, there's the aspect that we would necessarily include trips to sites, and I think there's also a component to where technical people from Mexico will be coming here, and the exchange going the other way. So that would put some limits on it, but I think in general the training would allow anybody who is interested to come in.
Nice. And zooming in on that, we're talking about culture and heritage. A number of different components can fall under that. In terms of the various aspects of the program, can you highlight some of that as well?
Yeah. Okay. So heritage is broad. I mean, we could talk natural heritage, built heritage. We could talk movable or immovable heritage. The training the first component of the project is to examine how we could manage heritage assets in its widest definition. And that is the program that Winston was talking about, and it's virtual, and there's an open invitation to anyone who is interested. You need to get in touch with the Office of the Prime Minister, Josette Dals, who is the point person, to get registered. That program the participants will understand the fundamentals of heritage management. What are some of the key things you need to take into consideration? It will look at the policy framework and how you come up with policies and regulations to manage heritage. And a lot of that training will draw on the experiences in Mexico, where participants will take a walk through how Mexico got to where it is. And they have really good programs on heritage management. And when one is finished with that, whether you're interested in the conservation of buildings or the conservation of artifacts, you would leave that experience with some knowledge on how to go about doing that.
Now, how does the program then even help you to identify exactly, because as you rightfully mentioned, heritage is so broad.
Mm-hmm.
So does the training program encapsulate identifying what is a heritage site, helping us to be able to add to the list? Are we at all looking at that in that respect? First, to determine, I suppose that's what it is, to determine what is a heritage site. We know of some that are existing now, but are we determining new ones as well?
The program will focus on known heritage sites, those that we know. If we, for example, Dauphin is included in this project, and at Dauphin, which we know to be a heritage site, but we know very little about, there is going to be an archaeological investigation and a biocultural investigation. So local experts or persons who are interested will work along with Mexican experts to see how we begin to go from saying this is a heritage site to finding out why it is a heritage. What are the assets that are there? How do we catalog and map those things? And how do we then use that to develop maybe a tourism experience? And how do we proceed to do the interpretation? Though that's another component of the project. That's not part of the first component, which is the training. The training is going to be more on the framework for heritage management. How do you determine how an piece of artifact could be protected? Those types of practical things.
And so, Dr. Fulgen, is in terms of, because there are individuals perhaps who own lands and the heritage sites are perhaps within there, or you need to do a sort of go through their own lands to get to the heritage site. In terms of how do you see this program really empowering St. Lucians for them to be able to take ownership of the heritage sites within themselves?
I think the program allows us to, again, put the spotlight on these sites. Most of the sites that are going to be used are sites that I already know, like Mr. Dulce spoke about the Dauphin. And why is Dauphin important? Because Dauphin has pre-Columbian heritage. In fact, the logo of the National Trust is actually from that site. There's a petroglyph there, that's where it's coming from. So when you look at the National Trust logo, that is a petroglyph left by the pre-Columbian people. There's also, Dauphin also was a very important town during the French Revolution. It was burnt down and never built. So there's a lot going on at Dauphin. So we know it's there. So the project is going to drill down, basically, to make sure that everything is cataloged. We know why it is important, how it is important. Most of our heritage sites are in places that are access. I don't think access is a big issue with these heritage sites. But I think the fact that the project is coming, that we're having this conversation now, is putting a spotlight on heritage, which is very, very important. You spoke about national identity being something that is not always obvious to people. But I believe it's not just knowing your national identity could actually be taught to you in the wrong way. You may have the wrong identity if you don't know where you're coming from. And I think that project is part of a wider process, because philosophically, you step back, you need to know your why. Why are we doing this? And every little component we put together fits into the why. And eventually we get to where we want to go. So the project, yes, is a specific project. We are accessing resources from a cooperative government who are helping us, but it's part of a wider, a bigger project. In fact, putting our why out there so people understand who a St. Lucian is, what a St. Lucian is, and what makes up a St. Lucian. And looking at these specific heritage sites allows us to do that.
Nice. You know, earlier you mentioned here, you wanted to add to that?
Yes, I just wanted to add something to that. In terms of your question about whether the project will be looking at new sites as well. And our answer is that no, it will be looking at the known sites. But one of the things that the Trust is doing at this time is to put together a list of buildings, initially buildings and sites of archaeological or historic interest. And through that process, new areas, new sites can be identified and placed on that list. But the list is not a legally binding list as yet. Under this project, we will be looking at legislation as well, to come up with the kind of legislative framework that we need to make that list a legal document, and to look at how we can manage heritage assets within the context of a legal framework. Right now, it is all left to policy and to organizations like the Trust and the Society trying to convince people, that you should protect this building or you should do this or not do that. The legal framework is important, and that is also part of this project.
And of course, the Mexican state is one of the best examples, because if you know anything about Mexico,
yes,
the first thing comes to mind is the pyramids, the Mayan pyramids. So they've had to go through the process of identifying and managing. And if anybody could teach us how to do that, I think the skill set that they're going to share with us will definitely be important here.
Because just watching Mexico, growing up, learning about the history and so forth, you've seen that they've been able to leverage the heritage, but the level of respect that goes with that leverage, so that there is that fierce demonstration of protection that goes along with that. So I do believe that is the society we should look up to for us to be able to try to get to that level. That being said, in terms of, because we're speaking about managing those sites, but what exactly does that mean? Can you break that down for us and zero in, if you can, on the sort of skill sets that people will be able to come away with by the time the training is over? I know that's pretty broad.
Yeah, it is, but There is another component of the program which deals with developing management plans for these sites. And there will be another training exercise to develop local skills to produce these management plans. Each site will, of course, be managed differently. We take Pigeon Island as an example. It is a heritage site, and it is managed by the National Trust in certain ways because in addition to protection and preservation, it is a site that we use or that is used to generate income, but more importantly for people to enjoy that what the site has to offer. The Peters Management Area is another heritage site, but has to be managed differently from Pigeon Island because that's a site that's a multiple use site. And so the management elements that come into play are very different. If we could take the Point Sab Environmental Protection Area, that can also be considered a heritage site. That is land-based and sea-based. So there is no one answer that fits all to your question. It depends on the characteristics of the site. What are the assets? And it's not about sustainable use. It's not about exploitation, but it's about sustainable use. That is why we are trying to move into heritage management rather than heritage protection or heritage conservation. Some places you will need to protect. You will need to protect at all costs. But there are other places that you can use so that people enjoy, people could gain economic benefits and social, even spiritual benefits. So the management regime for each site would be site-specific.
Yeah, and as well, we need to keep in mind that we're a small island, tiny island, and management of heritage site does not just mean the historic aspect of it. It also has to do with the natural aspect of it. If every single site that Mr. Tulsi has actually mentioned, we have to manage both the natural, the environment, as well as what we find in the ground has been what they call material culture that human beings have produced. And if you ignore one of them, it's the detriment of the other. And that's the risk that we run because we're so small. And that is why we have to pay so much attention to managing those sites, because you're so small, there's so little space that to conserve everything is to be a problem. You have to be able to manage it to allow for give and take, to allow people to enjoy, but to conserve as well. Because at the end of the day, if people are locked out of what is so-called theirs, you have a problem with management because there's no ownership being taken of these sites.
That's an important point that you're making, because I think when we think of conservation, we think of development, a lot of the time we think it's one or the other. But from your perspective and relating it to this program as well, is it something that we could see that the two can in fact be, can work hand in hand, can happen simultaneously, or one can also lend to the other?
Well, I go back to my work. There's something I wrote a long time ago, and the phrase that came out of it is patrimony or patricide. If you don't protect the patrimony, what are you doing? All right, and it's patricide. Yes, we have to conserve, but yes, people have to eat. And I think that's why the term management is being used. You have to be able to allow people to use the sites recreationally, commercially, but at the same time, people will understand if we manage the site properly, it will be there for us to actually use. If we don't, we'll have it for a few years and that's the end of that.
Yeah, because development does not always have to mean a new shiny building in a spot where something, of significant importance used to be. It can be, utilizing that space and maximizing the full potential of the space to a point where, again, this program is trying to assist with unemployment in St. Lucia to a point where, it can even be of economic value as well.
I think the whole idea of the battle being between a shiny building and an old building is because St. Lucia has just gotten to this point. If you look at the other places, Mexico, if you look at all around the world where you have heritage sites, this idea is no longer one that's like 30 years ago. We are here now because we're young. And I think sometimes we forget that. We're only here now because we're young. We're just getting involved in this and so we'll get to the point where the development does not always mean a shiny building. It could be something else. And it's not the only thing that threatens heritage. We have climate change. That's also a big threat to heritage. So when we're thinking of conservation and management, development is not the only thing we have to manage. We also have to manage the environment that we're in.
Good point.
Instead, how much of education, and formal education I'm speaking of in this respect, to conservation, because having young persons interested in becoming qualified, becoming specialists in archaeology and so forth, so that they can become the sort of giants and protectors of St. Lucia's patrimony. Do you think that's missing from our conversation nationally?
I think that's better for Vincent to speak to, but if I could speak to how this project addresses that. We recognize that as an area, as a gap. But we also thought when we were working on this project that there is not enough to create career paths, single career paths in this area for people, for upcoming students. And if you train a whole bunch of them, then what are they going to do? What this project does is to introduce techniques for heritage management, including the conservation and restoration of heritage buildings, into the curriculum of the Sarah Lewis Community College. What we are hoping will happen is that the students who do those courses, it will whet their appetite. So if they go off to do engineering, then or architecture, then they may choose a course within the bigger framework of the architectural training that focuses on that. And through that process, we can then get people who are architects but have this specific skill. People could be interested in economics, say studying economics or tourism. But by getting exposed to heritage and heritage-related training, they could begin to look at their broader education in a way that incorporates this. That's where we're hoping the project will go. But the first step is to have these concepts included at the curriculum of the college.
So Dr. Fulgence, in effect, igniting the passion.
Yes.
That's where you come in.
Yeah. It's something I've been very interested in for a very long time. I've spoken about it almost every time a mic has been placed on me, is the fact that awareness is necessary. From my experience, I taught history for a long time. And when young people are exposed to St. Lucian history, the light comes on.
Yes.
All right? So I think it has to be a situation where the education brings the awareness. The awareness now, what some people call the consciousness. If you're conscious of who you are and what you're doing, you definitely be doing it to ensure that who you are is maintained. So when people understand what has made them St. Lucian, it becomes important. Right now, it's always, like I said earlier on, when there's a battle between development and conservation, that the conversation starts. And maybe the issue peters out, and then the conversation stops. But I think if we have a population conscious of those issues, let's look at it, let's say basically politics, the distribution of resources to different sectors. If the society decides, hey, this is important because this is part of my heritage, no government can ignore it. If a site comes under threat, let's say climate change, people could say it's necessary for us to do what's important to protect that site. So it's not always black and white. There's always nuances, and that's why we talk about heritage management. But I think the first step in a broader national conversation is to get people to understand or exposed to that history, and on top of that foundation, a very strong foundation, we begin to build the rest, and we get to a point past where we are now, where we have people with the consciousness, we have some people with the skills, because I can tell you, I'm a trained archaeologist, and I haven't done archaeology at Lucia since 2009, because there's no, if I were not a history teacher, it would have been impossible to make a living of archaeology in St. Lucia. There are sites, yes, but then we're not a society that's with 5 million people where we have critical mass, where you can, the government, okay, for example, governments need an archaeologist, a national archaeologist. Is that a national priority? Can you get somebody, I can to ask my students, you need to go and study this. And they would say, so when I come back, what am I going to do? And they're very correct. So it does not allow us to get to that point where we have specific skills for specific people who will be employed for the specific things. I'm an archaeologist working as a history teacher who's now part of an administration system. You know, so we have to get people with the skills and the knowledge, but they will be distributed throughout the society, understanding what their role is.
So doesn't that make I suppose that makes it very difficult then for that broader national conversation and the broader national appreciation of folk culture and heritage? Because I think a lot of people, and to Homer's point earlier, it is almost as if individuals believe that they can't coexist or have that appreciation still further themselves, but protect that culture and heritage. Because, for example, you may tell someone, listen, you can't go and break down this building because it is, you know, it means so much. Okay, well, I need that spot because I need to put a house for me to live now. You're talking to me about something that's probably 100 years old. Because people are so consumed with the now and advancing their own personal situation and interest that it makes it difficult to break through that barrier to have that sort of rise of the national consciousness. So at least that is my experience when I sort of interface with individuals about these conversations.
No, that's right. But we can't really go back and lament too much what happened in the past. But how did a lot of these historic buildings end up in private ownership in the first place? They were at one point owned by the state. So at the political level, the consciousness was not there going back all those years. Unfortunately, it is not there now either. Because all these things that we're talking about, the development or conservation, if the political framework was, and the political powers were sufficiently interested in this, then the regulations and the policies would be in place, and we will not have situations where a developer will come and say, I intend or I plan to or I want to destroy this landscape or bulldoze that building. And it will be allowed. It should not be allowed. You know, the government has to be very clear on what it will and will not allow. We don't have a department within the government system that deals with this. You know, that has never been there. The Physical Planning and Development Act has a section that deals with it, but developers invariably find ways around this. Look at what is happening within the PMA and major development with it. I don't want to get into these controversial things, but I'm just using it as an example of where it is obvious that something should not have been allowed, but was allowed. So we need the political will, but more importantly, I think, and first, we need a political conviction that heritage and heritage assets are an important part of the development, an important variable in the development equation and must be protected. We spoke a lot about Mexico. France is perhaps the most visited country in the world, but it doesn't have a program to promote its tourism. It does that itself. And why do people go there? Cuisine, culture, history. You know, so people come to St. Lucia, yes, we do, but what is different between St. Lucia and, say, Grenada? Topography, which is our geography, our landscapes, and our culture. And if we could sufficiently distinguish ourselves, then we could be doing better in those areas.
And you mentioned France, and I'm thinking about my own experience that I had during a brief study period there, and you know, going to those government offices, they all buildings that are hundreds of years old, and you go in, and I felt so dwarfed, if you can imagine that, me being dwarfed by the buildings, and going in and being told about the history of those buildings, and everyday modern day business is being taken, is happening in there. And in a sense, I think too that the sort of national pride, because there are some societies where people feel like they're walking on the shoulders of giants because they really do understand where their country has come from and all that it has achieved through the years.
But I'll tell you something, France was not always like that. It wasn't always like that. There was a process that got it to that point. And I think we need to learn from the countries that have gotten to that point so we don't make the same mistakes. Very often we moving, it's like a teenager, an impetuous teenager, full of energy, wanting to learn what's supposed to happen and do what they feel like doing all the time. And we don't take notice from what the adults are saying because we've been there before, we know better. I think we right now are impetuous teenagers and we need to take advice from those who have done it before. And it's more precarious for us because of our size. Our size makes it even more difficult because breaking down an old building in Paris is just one old building. Breaking down an old building in St. Lucia might be the only
old building.
Only old building. Okay, so our size makes it even more imperative that we understand those things. Mr. Tosi spoke about the political situation, and in St. Lucia very often when you say politics, everybody takes it to parties and politics. So I'd rather use the word national and state because these are right now these are trigger words across the Caribbean. These two words are trigger words. So I'll use national and state. We must have a national understanding, and the state must act in a manner that when the people who control the levels of the state are no longer the ones in control, that the structures that are there remain so no one comes and plays footsie with it. Because currently what we have are guidelines, we have understandings and so on. And very often, two gentlemen have an agreement, and one decides I'm no longer a gentleman, and then you have really issues. And I mean, you could think of so many issues in the last 20 years in St. Lucia where that has happened, especially when we're looking at heritage, management, and conservation. Again, I'm stressing, because of our size, we cannot afford to make the impetuous mistakes that other countries were able to make to get to where they are today.
Not just that. Listening to, the conversation and the point that national pride, national understanding is important. It makes me go back to the thought of the curriculum and history being taught in schools. I think St. Lucian history in schools it's very on the surface from, me doing history.
Well, I can tell you there's none.
So I think that's one of the areas that we may, down the line, I know we're starting with this project and it's a great point where you teaching management, we're putting in place policy and legislation that can guide it. But I think at some point, or I should ask, do you think at some point we could lend to these other important aspects as well?
Let me put on myself half a cap here. South Louis actually has a course that teaches St. Lucian history.
Nice.
And it's the only course that's doing it right now. The Heritage Coalition is trying to lobby the Ministry of Education to include history, St. Lucian history, in the curriculum. Because right now it's very surface, like you say. You would say it's surface, I would say there's none. Cultural activists would say there's a little. But I think we're starting from zero when it comes to the national St. Lucian history in the curriculum here. So the National Heritage Coalition is right now furiously working to push to get that into the curriculum. And we're hoping that before the end of the year, the process could actually start. Conversations have now started. Hopefully, the conversations lead to a process, and eventually we get to that point. But South Louis can take a bow. We actually have a course called St. Lucian History.
Is that something that I could take, or it's for students?
Can anyone sign up?
The way it's set up right now, I think it's possible for you to do it standalone.
Okay.
But it's not for free.
Of course not. Of course not. Of course not. But it does sound like a course that I would be interested in taking for sure.
Homer and I would be willing to pay for it.
We will pay for it.
Well, because we want everyone to go out there and pay for it as well. Because we want South Louis to be in a position, the college to be in a position to up that as well. So of course, Dr. Fulgence, we will pay.
Going back to the projects, I want to, of course, give you the opportunity to highlight some of the components that you think are important for us to remember, and the components, of course, that are important for people to know in terms of them being involved in it.
Yeah. Okay. If I could first say that the whole idea came out of conversations between the governments of Mexico and St. Lucia. And when the this project idea was first floating. We brought together heritage management organizations, the trust, the society. We involved the National Archives, the National Conservation Authority, the Ministry of Tourism, the Ministry of Sustainable Development, the PMA, and all the stakeholders. We came together and we started throwing ideas around. That there is this opportunity, how do we make the best use of it? And it was a lot of back and forth because people were interested, different organizations were interested in different things. But we finally settled to sort of at a benchmark that there are certain things, elements, and we have talked about some of them, that are missing in the wider framework for heritage management. And so we built a project based on that. We mentioned the workshop, which is going to be hopefully as many persons as possible. Many persons will sign up. That will look at the fundamentals of heritage. How do you manage heritage? How do you care for it? Looking at the Mexican experience and trying to bring some of those here. Then there will be some field work. I think we spoke earlier about what was intended at the Dauphin Valley. There will also be field work at the Mardumen's quarters in Fiji and within the PMA, looking at the assets that are there, mapping, how do you map the assets that are there, how do you take stock of them, and then come up with management plans and how to manage them. We also have the development of management plans for the sites that we would identify, and to develop local skills on producing these plans. And as was mentioned earlier, each plan will be site-specific. It depends on what you have and why you want to manage it. Some places it's for conservation, preservation, some is for sustainable livelihoods. There is another component where Mexican experts will come to St. Lucia and do hands-on training, brick and mortar training, on how to rebuild and protect these heritage sites. And that is one of the elements we hope will get into the curriculum at the Sorte Luis Community College. At that point, we will invite artisans who are interested in those skills. It will be, whether buildings are made of metal, brick, or wood, it will cover all three aspects of restoration of these buildings. We mentioned regular legislation as well. That's a major area of weakness. The Trust has been working with the Ministry of Physical Planning to come up with heritage management legislation. We are calling them an antiquities bill, but antiquities within the context of that draft covers all elements of heritage. But the process has stalled, and while we were working with the Mexican authorities to develop the project, they said they have that legislation already, but it's of course in Spanish. So at some point when we get to that part of the project execution cycle, they will provide us with an English version, and we're going to look at what we have, what they have, and see how we could work with the legal minds to create that bill, which will then give legal protection. But we have to be careful. I think Winston said it quite well, that while we have to learn from others and how they got to where they are, we have to do that in the context of our size, our reality. So it's not a matter of taking the Mexican law and putting it here. We've got to make sure that it meets our expectations. And there will be training as well in how to interpret heritage sites, how you create information materials, how you do the research and produce interesting stories about these sites. There'll be some training in that area so that we could link the heritage sites with the tourism sector and with tourism product. And there is another component where persons from St. Lucia will go to Mexico spend the time within the heritage management organizations, see how they're structured and how they function, and visit some of the sites, including archaeological sites, to see how they practice what they're doing in the office, how they translate it into the field, so that some of those skills will be brought back here. So those are the key elements of the project. It's quite a complex project. Different sets of persons will be involved at different times, and how you bring it all together to achieve what the two of you were talking about, which is sort of raise the level of heritage management in the country in a way that is sustainable, but that meets our development pressures and demands at this time.
Yeah, and so it's taking place over, the workshop is not all happening all within 1 week. So it is from February all the way to April of 2022. And so that gives you an understanding that it is a full course, if you will, right, Dr. Felicia? It's a full course of what you really need. So by the time you come out of there, you're almost an expert. Gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for sharing with us. But before we sign off, we do have a message from the Embassy of Mexico here in St. Lucia, speaking about the cooperation with the government and people of St. Lucia as well as this project. So, Miguel, let's go to the video.
Good day. At the Embassy of Mexico, we are proud of our diverse cooperation projects which have been developed with the government of St. Lucia in recent years, like the construction of the Phase 1 of the Dennery water plant, the installation of greenhouses, the donation of resilient coconut plants, and lately the donation of medical ventilators during the pandemic, as well as a variety of courses and trainings offered for capacity building. Now, it is a pleasure for us to welcome the launch of the project entitled Heritage Management to Promote National Identity, Creation of New Tourism Experiences, and Reduce Unemployment, which forms part of the first official technical and scientific cooperation program between Mexico and St. Lucia, and, therefore, to invite people interested in cultural heritage management to participate in this first workshop, which will be conducted in Spanish and English, completely online and for free for all the participants. This workshop, organized by the Mexican Agency for International Development Cooperation, AMEXID, and the government of St. Lucia, with the help of many other Mexican and St. Lucian institutions, will allow the participants to learn and take advantage of the knowledge and experience of Mexican institutions like the National Commission of Protected Natural Areas, CONAP, and the National Institute of Anthropology and History, INA, which have already gained some knowledge of the cultural heritage of St. Lucia from the visit that they paid to this country in November 2019. It is important to highlight that the objective of the workshop and the project is not only to share knowledge and strengthen capacities of the participants, but to encourage and facilitate the creation and consolidation of public policies and solid institutions for the management of the heritage of St. Lucia. Join us. We look forward to having a large participation in this first workshop as a prelude of the impact that our first bilateral cooperation program will have. Thank you.
And thank you very much for that message there from the Embassy of Mexico here in St. Lucia as they collaborate with the government of St. Lucia, by the St. Lucia Archaeological Historical Society, and some other actors as well in this cooperation project on heritage management, promoting national identity. Gentlemen, I want to be able to give you some closing remarks as we say goodbye. Your thoughts, gentlemen, on the project, and of course, if you know, to make a plea to St. Lucians to avail themselves of this opportunity.
Keep go first.
I want to appeal to everyone who's within earshot. Please try to avail yourself of this opportunity, because it will be very enriching. It's not just educational, but enriching, because it allows you to learn more about St. Lucia, and you get a skill set which will allow you to help develop St. Lucia.
Well, I was involved with the embassy and local stakeholders to put the project together. It was a process that was very iterative. It involved a lot of back and forth discussion. But I think that overall the project will certainly help us improve the environment in which we manage our heritage assets. And I want to join both the Mexican Embassy and Dr. Fulgens in encouraging as many persons as possible to get enrolled in this program and to benefit from, and so that they all benefit from it.
Yeah, so we can all benefit. We're jealous, right?
I mean,
signing up?
I am thinking about it for sure. And if you are, and if you require any further information on the project, of course, to register, you could send an email to jmaxwell@gosl.govt.lc, and that is Ms. Josette Maxwell Dalsu, and who is the program officer in the Office of the Prime Minister. And you could give her a call as well. The number to call is 285-1298 or 468-1243. I know you're going to tell me, Lisa, to go a little more slowly with that. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. The number to call is 285-1298 or 468-2143.
Wonderful, I got that. And also, if you please review this program if you're just tuning in. It's worth it. Review this program because we posted on YouTube, we posted on Facebook, so you can get to it at any time at your leisure. And of course, we are running again on Reel on on NTN. Also, you can check out our web page, Government of St. Lucia's webpage, for you to get full details. And there's a breakdown of the various courses, if you will, that you will be undertaking. So go there and you will find all the information that you need on this program. Yeah, Hama? So for the weekend, you are going to do what?
For the weekend, I'm going to do a little sewing. I'm going to research and register us for the program. Also, I want to just remind parents, on Monday, when it comes to school, Monday 24th of January to Friday 28th of January, the groups that will continue face-to-face instruction, again, just a reminder, early childhood education centers, as well as grade 6 students, Form 5 students, vocational and tertiary institutions. All other students refer to online learning. Yes, and that is as per the continuity of learning plan. So just a guide, be guided accordingly. And if you're not quite sure in terms of what times your students or children have classes, you do want to contact your school teacher or the principal for guidance on that.
So it's not our first rodeo, St. Lucia, where that's concerned. By now, I think we should all have that particular rhythm.
Yeah,
when we know that we have to roll back. And this is what COVID-19 has just brought upon us. We have to learn really how to truly adapt. And there are times when, yes, we can go out full bloom and get what we're doing. But when the data shows us, the information says, or the situation shows you clearly that you need to dial back. And this is what the ministry has done in the interest of everyone so that we can all be safe. We now need to find ourselves in making adjustments so that we can ensure that the children remain safe, the teachers are safe, and that as much as possible, let's just keep learning going as much as possible. And as Homer said, making contact with the school is important. And I do believe that you're still allowed, there are children still without devices. However, just as in the past, right now, you can get the classwork physically. So you can go and you can get copies of that and so forth. So at least for next week, we know what is happening. And at the end of the week, there'll be an assessment done, reevaluation, see what the situation is presenting. And then another decision would be taken as to how we move forward. Exactly. But most importantly, for this weekend, please follow all protocols. Continue to wear your mask, social distance, sanitize, stay home when confinement time is there. Enough with the going out and exercising our freedoms.
So, not have said it better, Lisa.
So that's it here from us. Thank you so much for spending the time. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us and giving us this quite informative session. Lisa Joseph alongside Homer DeMarc. Until we meet next time.